September 11th. The night before September 11th, 2001, I was out enjoying a birthday dinner for David, my new boyfriend. I spent the night at his apartment at 61 Jane Street in the West Village. We woke up to an uncommonly beautiful morning, sunny, crisp, and clear. Too beautiful. A curse in reverse. We were drinking coffee when my beeper went off. It was a few minutes after 8:45. The moment American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. I called into the assignment desk on David's landline, and I got the day shift supervisor at CNBC. He said, "I know it sounds weird, but we're hearing that a plane or something just crashed into the World Trade Center. Go now, call me when you're near. I'll hook you up with a crew in the truck." I kissed David goodbye, found a cab almost immediately, and I was still en route minutes later, at 9:03, when the second plane, United 175, flew into the South Tower. By the time the taxi reached the north side of Canal Street, only a few minutes later, it was obvious that all lower Manhattan was quickly turning into a no-go zone. No matter where you looked, the cops were turning around all vehicles. No one was going south of Canal Street except on foot. I had learned over the years that sometimes at a crime scene you could flash your press card and talk your way past the cops. Not this time. I paid the fare, got out, and walked the rest of the way. I wove my way over block by block until I got to West and Warren Streets, as close as they'd let me go. I was 3 blocks from the towers. I did not see our microwave truck right away and tried to call in, but there was no cell service. That made sense because the transponders used by the big cell phone companies sat atop buildings that had been hit by planes. I learned later that the city's entire mobile network rapidly overloaded in a mass call event, or MCE. Call traffic doubled almost instantly. Cell service along the entire East Coast soon failed, or at best was intermittent. Without their transmitters, most local TV stations in the area could no longer broadcast. They were knocked off the air. Only Channel 2, the CBS owned and operated station, where I had started 24 years earlier, stayed on the air throughout. The station had wisely maintained a full-powered backup transmitter at the Empire State Building uptown. Good call. I finally spotted the CNBC truck pulled over near Manhattan Community College on West Street. Jeff, the sound tech, was inside. I got in and waited. It was a true cocoon. I watched everything around us and felt strangely protected. After some time, I left the truck and walked toward the burning towers. I watched for almost a minute straight. Way up, 1,300 feet in the air, I saw tiny figures with dense flames raging behind them. The heat was too much to bear, and so they would jump. No net. It's hard to admit, but as usual for me, tragedy turned into a cartoon. Shit, there's one, there's another. I could reduce them to tiny, dark-colored dots tumbling through the sky, real-life floaters, an amusement park where they would all miraculously somehow land on a trampoline. There were couples who jumped holding each other's hands. I remember that. And then there were those who didn't jump but who were suddenly blown into the sky by the force of exploding gases behind them on whichever floor they'd been stuck. A fire that was 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to weaken the structural steel around the victims. Up there, the building was literally melting. I always knew the bodies were real, that these were real people I had seen falling to their deaths. If I focused on the shock, though, I would not make Deadline, would I? And I always made Deadline. I could be counted on. I processed the way I always did when working breaking news, like homicides or fires or shootings, all those fatals on the interstate and the markets where I'd worked. I had learned over 20 years how to safely frame reality as I took it in. I'm not proud of it, but I was more concerned with the quality of the video we'd get than with the tragedies themselves. After decades in news, I could hear the same old questions playing in my head. When do we break off and get the sound bites? Do you think we should stay? Are you sure we're going to have enough? What else is going to happen? I turned away after seeing 4 more bodies tumble out of the sky. I'd had enough. I walked the few steps back to our truck and got in. The next day, the New York Times estimated the body count of the jumpers at 50. USA Today estimated 200. Guesswork. None of those victims' bodies were ever identified. What seemed like an eerie calm set in, but at 9:59, less than an hour after it was hit, the South Tower came down with an overpowering rumble. The thunder it made was something from another world, and it just kept going. It went on so long that I began to wonder if it really was the building coming down or something else. I couldn't tell. It reminded me of the earthquake I survived in L.A. in '94, when pieces of the Earth's crust were actually shifting beneath my feet. I'd held onto my bed's headboard as my body was hurled into the air 3 times, like somebody was lifting and dropping my apartment building onto the ground. 29 minutes after that first tower fell, the North Tower collapsed too. Jeff and I watched a huge cloud of smoke and debris rolling quickly up West Street and directly toward us. Hundreds of people came running past, trying to stay ahead of the cloud. All of them were covered in a toxic white powder, and so were we. It didn't make any sense to me to just stand there. We got back in the truck. Did all those people running past us know something we didn't? I rolled down the window and shouted to a woman passing outside, "Why are you running?" She answered back only, "Inside, inside." And then I realized that no one knew how far they needed to run to stay safe from all the crap falling from the buildings and crashing through the air. Our AM/FM radio was unable to tune in any station, so we had no idea about what might be happening outside our bubble in Lower Manhattan. We had no way to broadcast live, and in those days we had no redundant technology that would have enabled us to communicate with our newsroom across the river in New Jersey. In 2001, cell phones did not yet have the smartphone capabilities that became standard only a few years later. We really were shut off from the world that day. We could see an army of emergency workers helping people, but we could not get a feel for the big picture. Was the world still there? We had seen all those people running past, and we could hear when new sections of the towers gave way. We were now covered in the toxic cloud that rolled up the street, just like everybody else was. The problem was, we had no idea just how dangerous it was. A few years later, I had to have 3 skin cancers removed from my scalp. Skin cancers were the most common post-9/11 injuries reported among people at the site that day. Despite all the cops and firefighters around us, we really were on our own. There was a surreal vibe. This time, it wasn't easy to keep that wall between me and what I was covering. Interesting, some yearnings don't go away, even in the face of a catastrophe. Jeff, the 20-something sound man, was a tall, lean, good-looking Irish-American lad with a working-class edge. He was also someone I had lusted after for years. In the days before Me Too, I felt safe in confiding in Jeff that I thought he was good-looking. Thank God he was okay with it. He actually found it funny because he couldn't imagine a guy finding him hot. Alas, mine was a one-sided love affair. I liked that Jeff was not threatened by my fancying him. The truth is that in the middle of all that shit, it felt nice to be stuck in the truck with him, windows rolled up, air conditioning on, wet towels over our faces so we could breathe. Years later, I began to feel some guilt about thinking of sex while present at such a cataclysmic event. But my long-standing shame about feeling sexual desire while thousands lay dead a few blocks away from me has given way to a more enlightened understanding about the ubiquity of sexual desire. And of course, if the world really was ending, why not focus on something sexy? After the first tower collapsed, but before the second tower fell, I suggested to Jeff that we take a photograph with the still smoking tower behind us. Ghoulish, perhaps, but I didn't care. I wanted something to remember it by. I took the shot of Jeff, and then as he began taking his snapshot of me, he noticed a smirk on my face. I was distancing myself again from everything around me. He said, "This isn't something you smile about, dude." I lost the smile, and Jeff got the shot. Over the hours, a number of people stopped by our truck asking if they could use our phones. I had to tell them ours were not working either and that we could be of no help. A squad of 5 firefighters walked past us on their way in. Their lieutenant paused long enough to ask, "Hey, can you hold on to this bag for us? We'll come back for it later." It was a fireman's gear bag, heavy with extra equipment. He never came back that day, but for some reason I could not believe he had perished. A few days later, I wanted to know for sure, and I called the fire department's public information desk, and I felt intense relief when they told me that the lieutenant and his squad had indeed survived. "Thank God," I said. "Where should I bring the bag?" And he said, "Oh, you can walk it into any firehouse in the city. They'll know how to get it to him." 9/11 was the most obvious example of something I had experienced but never really thought about. I had come to instinctually experience traumatic events by blocking them. I was there, but not fully. Maybe that's what drew me to the news business in the first place. I got to cover painful material, but not have to feel it in real time. When I arrived home that evening, I finally had a working landline. David, my new boyfriend, called, and I could immediately tell something was wrong. His voice was trembling. "Thank God you're okay," he said. He burst into tears, and he couldn't stop crying. "I was so worried about you." I said, "Honey, I'm so sorry we had no phone service." It was also true that I'd forgotten all about checking in with this man. Maybe I was in the moment after all. That was also the day that David told me he realized he was in love with me.